Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to another Monster Hunter Cross video, and some more exciting news. The most recent edition of Famitsu has just come out in Japan, the scans are online, there's 10 glorious pages, and I'm going to tell you everything you need to know. If you guys do enjoy this video, then it'd be awesome if you could hit that like button and leave a comment down below. Now let's get started. This issue covers a hell of a lot. We get a more detailed look at the 4 hunting styles, which we now know to be named Guild, Aerial, Striker and Bushido, but I'll be going into those in more detail in just a bit. We also get a more in-depth look at the second flagship monster, the big snowy elephant mammoth, and we also get a look at the new owl-like monster as well. Plus, we finally get a look at some of the new fancy armour and weapons, and that is where I'm going to start. So let's kick it off by taking a look at some images. This is the Greatsword, and as you can clearly tell by the coloration and the style, both the Greatsword and the armour set are from Dino Valdo, one of the 4 flagship monsters. Next up you have this image, which has a very Asian theme to it, and I therefore assume that this is the armour set for the 3rd flagship monster, the water dragon that people have nicknamed Bubbles. Following on from that, you then have the sword and shield with what I would imagine is the starter Beruna Village armour set, and it's the one that we saw in the gameplay preview last week. Then moving on from there, you have dual swords in what looks like the armour from the Great Macau. Then after that we have the hammer, and this one's a little difficult to see, but it seems like the armour previews tend to be sort of showing us kind of like male and female versions, so therefore, by that assumption, this would be the female's Beruna Village set. Then if you take a look at the hunting horn user, I'd guess that this set is from the new owl-like monster. The colouring matches and the style seems fitting. Moving over to the lance, this is from the currently unnamed green crystal type wyvern, and I've got to say this set looks super awesome. Then next up we have a gun lance with a male armour which looks again like it's from Dino Valdo. This definitely has to be my favourite armour set. After that we get another look at the green wyvern set, this time wielding the switch axe. And you then have the charge blade in what I can only imagine is the armour set from the snowy mammoth. It looks very thick, snowy, plus the colours kind of match the sort of fur on the monster, so it's probably a safe assumption. The same goes for the female hunter here wielding the insect glaive, and the insect glaive itself could well be from the same monster. You then have the bow in what looks like the female version of the water dragon or Bubbles armour set. And then moving over to the light bowgun, you can see the Great Macau set again, and finally for the heavy bowgun, once again this set is from the owl. So, I don't know about you guys, but I think some of those sets look absolutely insane. I am definitely a really big fan of Dino Valdo stuff. So what's next? Well, let's talk about hunting styles. As mentioned, the confirmed names are now Guild, Aerial, Striker and Bushido. Guild style is the regular style that veteran players have come to know and love. If you've played Monster Hunter before, this style will basically be what you're used to. Aerial style, on the other hand, is the one we've probably seen most of. It's the one that was shown during the gameplay demo, and you basically roll and jump towards a monster, and you can then use it as a springboard. This then launches you in the air, and it gives you an opportunity to attack from there, and obviously then gives you access to reach points that you wouldn't normally be able to reach. The Striker style, however, focuses much more heavily on your hunting skills. It's said that this style has a much more simplistic moveset, so that may well mean that it strips out some of the complexities from, say, the Guild style, but the reason for this is because this style allows you to equip 3 different hunting skills, which is something you can't normally do. And then finally you have what is known as the Bushido style. This is the one we saw in the trailer where the dual sword user dives through the Rathalos' fireball. This style focuses on countering, and supposedly, if you successfully counter a move, you actually follow up with a powerful counter attack. So as you can see, 4 completely different hunting styles that are really going to change up how we play. But what about hunting skills? I mentioned them briefly, we've spoken about styles, so let's talk skills. As you attack, you build up your hunting skill gauge, which you can see here in the screenshots of the bottom touchscreen. Once the gauge fills up, you're then able to use the move simply by tapping it on the touchscreen. It's also worth noting that these moves can also be comboed into. Now it looks like, by default, that you'll be able to equip 1 or 2 of these hunting skills, but then if you use the Striker style, the 3rd skill becomes available. And supposedly, you unlock more skills as you progress throughout the game. I don't know whether it's something that's linked to the story, or maybe it's linked to sort of the time that you spend with the weapon. Either way, that's something we'll need to find out, but if unlocking skills is genuinely a thing, it'll obviously encourage people to use loads of different weapons. Now hunting skills also come in a variety of different forms. Some of them are weapon specific, and can only be done if you're using that particular weapon. Others, however, are more generic, and can be used by all weapon types. For example, in the magazine, one of the examples was sort of like an ultimate evade or like a super evade, so we don't actually know kind of exactly what that means, but that's an example of a move that kind of spans all the different weapons. However, with that being said, let's actually take a look at some of the weapon specific hunting skills, and for most of these we've actually seen them in the trailers, but I want to kind of go over them in a little bit more detail. Starting off with the greatsword, you have a sort of super swipe. You may remember seeing this from the original shot in the trailer. The hunter sort of lands an attack, and then sheaths the weapon, and then this sort of like flamey red aura appears around it. Basically the way this works is that after performing a swipe attack, if you land the hit successfully, you then enter a sort of buffed or charged state, and it then means that the next time you perform a powerful swipe, it'll do considerably more damage. Then moving over to the longsword, again this one we saw in the trailer, it seems that with this one, if you land the hit successfully, for a short period of time afterwards, your spirit gauge is maxed, allowing you to continually use your spirit attacks. Then as for the sword and shield, well you've already seen the hunting skill, that's the one that they showed in the gameplay preview and also in the trailer where he does sort of the roundhouse slash. This basically gives you greater reach for the sword and shield, but that's not the only thing they want to talk about here. In the magazine, they also talk about something else really interesting. If you remember in the image I showed you at the start of the video, with the bed on armour and the sword and shield, you may remember the blade had a flaming aura. We saw this in a previous issue as well. It seems that in Monster Hunter Cross, there is going to be a new item or a new series of items that will allow you to temporarily imbue your blade with certain attributes. The red one seems to be tied to affinity, while the blue or green ones we have yet to find out. I'd imagine green could be say health, and blue may be sort of like stamina or movement speed or something like that. Now while I don't know whether these are exclusive to the sword and shield, it does seem like they are designed with the sword and shield in mind. As you know, it's the only weapon where you can actually use items without having to put the weapon away, so being able to apply these buffs on the fly is going to be pretty damn insane. Then moving over to dual blades, the move we saw in the trailer appears to be a combo or kind of hunting skill designed to help you cover ground whilst attacking. It could well be useful as like an evasion tactic as well as obviously like a damage thing as well. It'll allow you to kind of back in, back out and then sort of get back in to do some more attacks. As for the hammer, it's kind of obvious from the trailer what this actually does, but it's basically a much more powerful swing that looks like it results in a guaranteed KO if you land it. As for the hunting horn, firstly, once again you see the weapon specific hunting skill from the trailer where you do a devastating smackdown on the ground, but the more interesting thing is the mention of double notes. Now this is a little bit confusing to try and get your head around, plus me and my friend had a little bit of trouble translating this and sort of understanding it, but it seems like if you play double notes in quick succession, you can sort of queue up a repeat song, which can then be played again. Now I'm going to try and get some more information on this one or sort of like a better, clearer translation for a future video, but for now it seems like hunting horn is getting a little bit more technical. Moving on to the lance, there's a couple of things here. Again, the running charge that you've seen before, in this one you run forward guarding the whole way. So because your shield is up, it's probably a good way to sort of close the gap between your enemy, and perhaps you can use it to sort of guard through oncoming attacks, and then obviously getting close to do some nasty damage. But they also mentioned that Lance is getting another move that you can use after your third stab or lunge. If you use Lance, you'll know that things come in threes. You have like 3 side steps, 3 back steps, 3 stabs, 3 lunges, different things like that. And it seems like the third attack is going to get some sort of extra move, maybe like a charge hit or something. Either way, I'm sure we'll get more details in next week's weapon demos, but it does seem like it's geared towards adding a little bit more power to that final hit. Next up for the gun lance, and this is something you guys wanted to know about. In the gameplay that I uploaded last week, the gun lance received a new gauge. At the time we didn't know what it was, but now we do. This is a heat gauge, and the more you shell, the more the lance heats up. If it gets too hot, you overheat, and if you overheat, you can't shell. So basically I think it's designed to sort of encourage gun lance users to sort of like attack slightly more than sort of just shelling, and it also means you need to manage your gauge slightly better. Moving on to the charge blade. Again, nothing really new here. They did mention how charging the shield is important, which also ties into what I said about the gameplay demo. When the player tried to use the hunting skill and it failed or it whiffed, it wasn't actually because he missed the attack, but it was because, as I mentioned, he didn't have a charged shield. So the charge blade hunting skill seems like it acts like an even more powerful ultra. So you still need full files, you still need a full shield, and then once you've done that, you can then unleash it successfully. If we then move on to the insect glaive, this is an interesting one. Another thing people were asking about last time was the blue bar or the new gauge for the insect glaive. This is actually just for your Kinsect stamina. The Kinsect can run out of stamina in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, but you never actually know when it's going to happen simply because you can't actually monitor it. Whereas now the blue bar simply tells you what the stamina is for your Kinsect, so that way you can actually plan it slightly more accordingly. Also, the glowing orb that you saw in the gameplay demo is basically like a mini attacking barrier. It doesn't actually protect you, but if you're near an enemy, it will inflict extra damage to them. So it'll be pretty good if you've got like all 3 buffs and you're kind of like up in there sort of attacking and whatnot, then it can add on some extra damage. Then moving on to the bow, firstly it has a new move that allows you to jump backwards twice, and upon doing so you then dive or roll backwards even further and instantly charge a level 3 shot. So this will not only be a good way to get out of danger, but it's also going to be a good way to set up for some powerful shots. But on top of that, the move you originally saw in the trailer This is like a buff where you fire a shot in the air, it then rains back down on top of you, and it will provide you with certain different attributes. For example, the blue one here I believe increases movement speed, but there will be other things as well. Then finally, the light and heavy bowguns. Apparently these two weapons are getting a couple of new moves. First of all, thanks to the aerial style, they are actually able to attack in the air, which is what we saw in the trailer when the light bowgun user shoots down the Raytheon's spine. But they also have something along the lines of, say, preloaded or internal bullets. These seem to be bullets that the weapon naturally comes with, and they seem to have different attributes for the different weapons. So I guess this will be another decision to kind of factor in when choosing your actual bowgun. Now, I appreciate there was a hell of a lot to go through there, so apologies if some of it was fast and some of it didn't make too much sense, but don't forget there will be weapon demos coming next week, which should hopefully explain all of this in much more detail. So I will hopefully be able to follow up next week with a much more detailed breakdown. However, that's not quite everything. We've covered weapons, armour, hunting skills and hunting styles. Lastly, I just want to talk quickly about the new monsters. First of all, as mentioned, the snowy mammoth-like creature actually has a name now. It's called Gamuto, and he's actually a herbivore, but just like the other friendly monsters, when threatened, he will attack. He attacks largely with his trunk, he can fire ice balls at you, and he can also use his trunk to suck you back in, and he has some pretty powerful slams or stomps. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this monster simply because until we actually see some gameplay, it's kind of hard to convey some of these moves and things like that. But a couple of other things worth noting is that he can inflict the snow blight on you, which means obviously you get hit by the ice and you turn into a snowman. So if you are fighting him, you want to make sure you have something to deal with that. And also for when you're fighting him, he has snow around his feet. So I imagine this acts like a protective sort of layer and can be broken off a la kind of Zamtrios's ice spikes or something like that. Then finally, another new monster. This is called, get ready for this, Hororo Horuru. It sounds ridiculous, but it's actually an owl-like monster. It looks really cool, and this is obviously where some of those armor sets came from. It has claws on its wings, which it will use aggressively once it's in rage mode, and it has two new status effects that it can inflict on you. The first is this sort of yellow powder, which we still don't know exactly what it does, but it seems like it's some sort of confusion powder. And the second one is a sonic beam, or a screech, which puts you in a pinch state. And while there weren't any actual clear details on exactly what this state is, I kind of imagine it as sort of like a frozen state where, like, you know, when you hear the screech, it kind of sort of like freezes you in the spot for a second, maybe you can't move, and maybe you're stuck there, and it then gives the owl an opening to kind of swoop in and attack you. And then finally, just super quickly, we got a shot of Yangaruga, which clearly confirms that he is indeed returning. So that increases the number of currently known monsters. And that, my friends, is it for this issue of Famitsu. If you stuck around to the very end, then thank you very much for making it this far. There is loads of cool stuff to talk about, so jump into the comment section down below and start talking about it. What did you like the most? What are you most hyped for? I really want to know. And I want to give a massive shout out to Kogath from the Monster Hunter Wiki for very kindly providing me with the high quality Famitsu scans so that I can bring you guys these images. Make sure you check out the Monster Hunter Wiki for all the latest information, plus you can also follow Kogath on Twitter and on his blog as well. You find links to all of those in the description box down below. Aside from that, don't forget that the Monster Hunter Cross weapon demos begin Saturday, so I'll have videos for all of those up on the channel as and when they go live. So stay tuned for that, and obviously keep it locked for much more Monster Hunter coverage. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and thanks again for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.